They didn't strike her, didn't shove her against the wall. They didn't have to. They cut open her uniform shirt slowly, deliberately with a training knife. Not to wound, to humiliate. 3 men, one corridor, no witnesses. 3 men standing too close. One woman being treated like entertainment. And silence they mistook for submission. They called it field correction. They called it adjustment training. But what it really was, sexual harassment in uniform. What they didn't know was that the woman they were cornering wasn't what she appeared to be. She was a Navy SEAL commander, Tier 1 operator, SOCOM investigator, and by the time that knife hit the ground, all 3 were flat on their backs, disarmed, disoriented, done. But before we show you exactly what she did and the silent move that brought an entire base to its knees, you need to understand how it started, how a warrior went invisible, how predators grew bold, and how justice delayed for years finally found its moment. The humidity sat low over Fort Stockton like something with weight. Texas heat in late summer, the kind that makes fabric stick and breathing feel like work. The Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility stretched across 40 acres of packed, dirt cinder block buildings and obstacle courses that had broken thousands of bodies into something harder. This wasn't the parade ground at Annapolis. This wasn't even one of those sandbox bases in Florida where everything gleamed for the cameras. This was a cross-branch integration station. Marines, Navy, Army Rangers rotating through for advanced conditioning. A place designed for friction. And friction was exactly what Commander Bryn Thatcher was looking for. She stood at the edge of the main training yard, tucked in with the morning formation, quiet, motionless. Her regulation shirt was folded precisely at the wrists, dog tags tucked. Hair pulled back tight in a regulation bun, not a strand out of place. Her uniform looked clean but not fresh, washed too many times, worn at the elbow seams. There were no stripes on her collar, no distinguishing patches, no name tape, just a numbered armband clipped above the elbow. That was by design. This was anonymous integration, a test environment where even officers weren't identified unless they chose to be, unless they failed to perform. Bryn had chosen to be invisible, had chosen to look ordinary, had chosen the thick frame glasses that made her eyes seem smaller, had chosen the slightly hunched posture that made her shoulders seem narrower, had chosen to be underestimated, because underestimated was exactly where she needed to be. Someone muttered behind her, just loud enough to hear over the bark of commands from the instructor calling morning warm-ups. Logistics or admin, maybe? Don't think she's here for combat drills, another voice snorted. Doesn't look like she can hold a rifle, let alone handle close quarters. Probably paperwork overflow. They send these non-combat types in to observe and make notes. A third voice, younger, cocky. Bet she's not even active anymore. Look at that stance. Arms crossed like she's holding on to herself. Bryn didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. The 3 men behind her, younger, bulkier, with the kind of energy that spiked whenever they felt unseen, kept talking. One leaned slightly forward. Garrison duty, princess. Mark my words. They were wrong, of course, but Bryn didn't correct them. She didn't need to be believed. She just needed to be here. She just needed them to think she was weak. Because 3 weeks ago in an office 1,500 miles away, she'd been given a mission that had nothing to do with training. Norfolk, Virginia, 3 weeks earlier. The office of Rear Admiral Petra Kerrigan sat on the 3rd floor of the Naval Special Warfare Command Building, a structure that looked like every other military admin block from the outside but held secrets that could rearrange governments on the inside. Kerrigan's desk was spotless. No family photos, no motivational plaques, just files, classified files, and a woman who'd spent 30 years learning how to read what people didn't say. Bryn had stood at attention in front of that desk, not because she had to, but because Kerrigan commanded that kind of respect. The Admiral was 52, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for taking cases no one else wanted to touch, cases that ended careers, cases that exposed rot. At ease, Commander. Bryn relaxed, barely. Kerrigan slid a file across the desk, thin, too thin for what it represented. Fort Stockton, Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility. 4 formal complaints of sexual harassment filed in the past 18 months. 4 separate women, all Marines, all different units, all complaints resolved internally with findings of no merit. Bryn opened the file. 4 faces stared back at her. Young, proud, worn down. Corporal Reese Donovan, 23, transferred out after 6 months. Private Harper Quinn, 21, discharged early, medical reasons unlisted. Lance Corporal Ivy Marshall, 24, requested immediate reassignment to Camp Pendleton. Sergeant Fallon Brooks, 27, left active duty entirely. Honorable discharge. No explanation. 4 women, Kerrigan said quietly. 4 identical patterns. Harassment during training exercises. Escalation in isolated areas. Formal complaints filed. Internal reviews conducted by Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo, Director of Training. All 4 cases closed within 2 weeks. No disciplinary action. No follow-up investigations. Bryn looked up. Russo's protecting someone. Or multiple someones. Kerrigan leaned back. 3 names keep appearing in witness statements, though none of the victims would name them directly in official testimony. Corporal Garrett Hollis, Lance Corporal Zane Merrick, Private First Class Cole Brennan. All 3 have clean service records. All 3 have family connections. Garrett Hollis is the nephew of Colonel Thaddeus Hollis. Pentagon, strategic planning. Bryn's jaw tightened. So they're untouchable. They think they are. Kerrigan's eyes hardened. I need you to go in deep cover. No rank displayed, no SEAL identification. You'll register as a logistics coordinator, rotating through for cross-training observation. You'll be invisible. You'll watch. You'll document. And if they come for you the way they came for those 4 women, you'll give me probable cause for a federal investigation. Bryn had nodded once. What if they don't take the bait? Kerrigan's smile was cold. They will, because men like that can't help themselves. They see weakness, they exploit it. You'll be exactly what they're looking for. Alone, unprotected, quiet. Bryn had looked down at the file again, at Sergeant Fallon Brooks' face, at the way her eyes seemed distant even in the photo. She reached into her collar and pulled out a small silver chain. A Navy cross hung from it, not hers. It belonged to Lieutenant Sloan Ashford, her friend, her teammate, a woman who'd eaten a bullet 5 years ago because the weight of being ignored, dismissed, and violated had become too much. They won't get away with it this time, Bryn had said quietly. Kerrigan had stood, extended her hand. No, Commander. They won't. Fort Stockton. Present day. The drill started. High knees, drop rolls, shuttle crawls, sandbag drags. 10 at a time were called forward to pair off into rotating combat sequences. Grapples with progressive resistance. Knife defense drills. Mock takedowns. Bryn was assigned to the 2nd rotation group. And just as she'd known they would be, the 3 men from behind her rotated with her. The tallest of the 3 dark buzz-cut shoulders like a linebacker stepped forward with a grin. Corporal Garrett Hollis, 27 years old, 6'2", muscles built in a gym, not in the field. He looked at Bryn the way a wolf looks at something small and alone. Guess I'm stuck babysitting, he said loud enough for the others to hear. Bryn blinked once, expression unreadable, posture loose, non-threatening. The instructor barked. Start. Garrett lunged. Bryn sidestepped. He stumbled. Reset. A second attempt. This time Bryn let herself go down, gently, without flair, as if unsure of her footing, as if she'd lost her balance. The other 2 men, Zane Merrick and Cole Brennan, chuckled. Zane called out, his voice dripping with false concern. Don't break her in half, Garrett. The sequence ended. Bryn said nothing. When Garrett offered his hand to pull her up, she stood without touching him. A subtle thing, but he noticed. So did the other 2. By the time they hit the 8th drill of the morning, the story had spread across their row. That she was passive, unresponsive, fragile. Nobody in their circle had seen her retaliate, not once. That kind of silence made men like them believe in their own superiority. They weren't curious about why she was quiet. They were starting to get bold about it. And boldness unchecked was about to turn dangerous. The sun climbed higher, baking the heat into the gravel until it radiated upward through boot soles. Sweat darkened collars. Fabric clung. The air tasted faintly metallic, mineral dust and exertion. And with it came the loosening of discipline that always followed when authority drifted just far enough away to stop watching. That was when the tone shifted. Garrett Hollis no longer bothered masking the way his eyes tracked Bryn. Not respectful, not even curious, just assessing. The way a man looks at something he believes exists for his entertainment rather than his equal. Zane Merrick mirrored him. Leaner, sharper-eyed, the type who mistook swagger for command. Cole Brennan, broader in the shoulders, clearly the follower, laughed at everything the other 2 said. They fell in close during rotational drills. So close, their elbows brushed Bryn's ribs when they reset formations. At first, it was incidental, plausibly deniable. A squeeze through tightened ranks, a shoulder grazing hers as they moved past. Then it wasn't. Garrett bumped her. Not hard enough to draw notice, just enough to assert space where none was granted. When Bryn didn't flinch, didn't react, he smirked. Emboldened. Zane followed. nudging his knee slightly into the back of her thigh during a crouch sequence, feigning imbalance. "Careful," he muttered, mouth tilted in false concern. "You might hurt yourself out here." Bryn didn't rise to it. Her breathing remained even. Eyes forward, a line of calm that did not waver. That silence frustrated them more than defiance ever could. During a rest reset near the hydration table, Cole flicked his gaze over her uniform with deliberate slowness. "You always wear your shirt that tight?" he asked casually. Loud enough for those nearby to hear. Quiet enough to skate under the edge of formal misconduct. A couple of nearby trainees glanced over. Nobody intervened. No one wanted to start something that might turn messy. And men like these knew exactly how far to go without drawing command attention. "Maybe she's trying to show us something," Garrett added, barely suppressing a grin. "You know, motivation." The others laughed, low, unchallenged. Bryn took another sip of water and stepped back into formation. Across the yard, standing in the shade of the equipment shed, Master Gunnery Sergeant Dalton Graves watched. 58 years old, 36 years in the Corps, Gulf War, Somalia, Iraq. A man who'd seen things that turned idealism into pragmatism and pragmatism into something colder. He stood with his arms crossed, face unreadable, but his eyes tracked every movement. He'd seen Garrett Hollis and his crew before, seen the way they circled female personnel like sharks testing blood in the water. He'd filed reports, quiet reports, reports that went to Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo and died there. He'd watched good Marines, good women request transfers or simply disappear from active duty. He'd kept records, backup footage from security cameras before they were scrubbed from the official system. Because Dalton Graves had learned a long time ago that the chain of command didn't always protect the people it was supposed to. And now he watched this new woman, the one with the thick glasses and the hunched shoulders who moved like she was trying to take up less space. He'd read her intake file, logistics coordinator, observation detail, but something didn't sit right. The way she fell during the grapple drill, it was too controlled. The way she stood after Garrett bumped her, too centered. The way her eyes tracked movement even when her head didn't turn too aware. Dalton had spent 3 decades learning to spot operators, and this woman, whoever she really was an operator. He didn't intervene, not yet. Because if she was what he thought she was, she didn't need his help. She needed him to stay back and let the trap close. The instructors called for transitional drills, movement work that led through a narrow corridor bordering the equipment bay. A blind wedge of shadow just beyond the flickering utility lights, where spare mats and racks of wooden practice weapons lined the walls. It was used constantly, rarely monitored. Garrett, Zane, and Cole slowed their pace just slightly, just enough to let the rest of the formation move ahead, just enough to isolate Bryn. The drill rope station masked them from direct view, not concealed, just unobserved. The perfect place for what they'd already decided would happen next. Bryn didn't move away, didn't accelerate. She just kept walking forward, knowing exactly how men like this operated, knowing where they were about to lead the moment their swagger grew stronger with every unchallenged second. And her calm remained unbroken, because what they thought was submission was restraint. Restraint waiting for ignition. The corridor narrowed as the line of trainees moved through the equipment wing. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting pale reflections across stacked mats, folded harnesses, and shelves of rubber training blades arranged with clinical precision. The instructors' voices faded behind the cement divider, close enough to hear if someone raised their voice, far enough that no one would notice a quiet moment gone wrong. The 3 slowed again. So did Bryn. They didn't stop her. They guided her, subtly, with the language of instruction disguising intention. "Hold there," Garrett said, gesturing toward a bare patch beside the gear rack. "Your posture's off. Can't engage properly like that." A reasonable sentence, normal tone, the kind used 1,000 times every morning in places like this. Bryn turned just enough to appear cooperative, just enough to keep their confidence intact. Zane stepped in, arms loose, grin drawn thin. "Shoulders too tight," he added. "You tense up when you move. We'll show you the right angle." Cole reached toward the shelf and plucked a training knife. Rubberized, dull, built for drills, but still rigid enough to leave a message. He twirled it casually, like a toy. "Relax," Zane said lightly. "Just demonstrating. You'll feel where the weakness is." He moved closer. Close enough now that heat pulsed between them in a space that was never meant to be shared under pretense. The blade passed along the fabric of Bryn's uniform, tracing the line of her chest. Not threatening, not lethal, but deliberate all the same. Slow, suggestive. A violation masked as correction. The others watched, smirks tightening as the pressure escalated. See, Garrett murmured. Too rigid. Fabric bunches right here. You've got to loosen up. Then the knife bit, not into skin, into shirt, a sharp slice. Clean, intentional. Splitting fabric open from collarbone downward. Not deep, not dangerous, but unmistakably degrading. The fabric sagged. A thin horizontal rip spread across the seam, and the air shifted. A flicker of stunned silence passed through the corridor. Then came the laughter. Soft at first, encouraging, emboldened. You should feel lucky, Zane added, lips curling. Most wouldn't get this level of attention. Yeah, Garrett joined in. Consider it hands-on mentorship. And then from the end of the corridor, a shadow moved. Private Lennox Kim, 20 years old, 6 months into her first deployment, turned the corner. She'd taken the wrong hallway, gotten separated from her unit during the transition drill, and now she stood frozen eyes wide watching 3 men standing too close to another woman, watching fabric torn, watching something that made her stomach turn. Garrett's head snapped toward her, his grin evaporated, replaced by something colder. Get lost, he said, voice low. Dangerous. Before you need correction, too. Lennox's breath caught. Her eyes met Bryn's for just a second. And in that second, Bryn saw it. The same fear she'd seen in the photos of Reese Donovan, Harper Quinn, Ivy Marshall, Fallon Brooks. The fear of being next. Lennox turned and ran, her footsteps echoing down the corridor, fading, disappearing around the corner. And in that moment, Bryn made her choice. The 3 men turned back to her, confident, unchallenged, ready to continue what they'd started. Garrett stepped closer. Zane still held the torn fabric between his fingers. Cole blocked the exit behind them. They thought they had her trapped. They were wrong. Bryn's hand rose slowly, not to her torn uniform, to the small recording device clipped inside her collar. Hidden, active, capturing every word, every threat, every crime. Her eyes lifted. And for the first time that morning, their confidence faltered, because something in her gaze had changed. Not anger, not fear, something far more dangerous. Focus. You have one chance, she said, voice quiet, final. Step back, walk away, and maybe, just maybe, this doesn't destroy your entire lives. Zane scoffed. You threatening us? Cole laughed nervously. She can't do anything, she's nobody. But Garrett was looking at her differently now. Something in his predator instincts had finally woken up. Something that said this woman wasn't what she appeared to be. Who are you? He asked. Bryn didn't answer. She just waited, giving them one last chance to make the right choice. Garrett's hand moved toward her torn shirt again. I asked you a question. And that was when Bryn stopped waiting. The moment Garrett said, who are you, was the moment Bryn stopped playing defense. Her left foot shifted 6 inches back. Weight transfer complete. Shoulders aligned. She drew a single controlled breath through her nose. Eyes locked not on faces but on angles. Wrist to elbow. Stance to center of gravity. The mathematics of leverage and momentum. Garrett's hand moved toward her torn shirt again, reaching, still confident, still believing this woman was prey. She moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was surgical. Her right hand snapped up and intercepted Garrett's wrist mid-reach. Not with brute force, with anatomical precision. A grip that found nerve clusters and pressure points, forcing his hand to open reflexively. Before he could process what was happening, she pivoted, using his forward momentum against him. Her hip became a fulcrum. His body weight became a weapon against itself. He hit the concrete with a sound that echoed down the corridor. Dull, final, air driven from his lungs. Zane still held the training knife. He lunged, trying to use it as leverage, as threat. But Bryn had been fighting men with real knives in real wars since before Zane had graduated high school. Her left hand snared his wrist mid-swing. Twist. Hyperextension. The knife clattered to the floor. Her right palm drove upward into his chin, not to break, but to disorient. His head snapped back. She hooked his arm across her shoulder and executed a textbook control throw. Zane hit the mats hard, gasping, confused. The arrogance draining from his face like water through a sieve. Cole Brennan, the follower, the one who'd always let others lead, froze for a critical second. Fight or flight, his body chose flight. He turned toward the exit. Bryn's foot intercepted his ankle. Not a kick, a sweep. Precise, controlled. He went down face first. She was on him in a heartbeat, knee between his shoulder blade, his arm twisted into a compliance hold that made resistance impossible. Don't move, she said quietly. Any of you. 47 seconds. 3 men neutralized. the quarter silent except for their labored breathing. Garrett tried to push himself up. Bryn's voice stopped him cold. I said don't move. That wasn't a suggestion. And then footsteps. Multiple sets. Running. Heavy boots on concrete. Master Gunnery Sergeant Dalton Graves rounded the corner, first two MPs close behind. His eyes swept the scene in 2 seconds flat. 3 Marines on the ground. 1 woman standing. Torn uniform. Training knife on the floor. The story was written in their positions like words on a page. Behind the MPs came 2 more instructors drawn by the commotion. Staff Sergeant Williams, Gunnery Sergeant Park. Both froze at the threshold, taking in what had just happened. Secure them, Graves said to the MPS. His voice was command, not request. Separate, holding. No communication between them. The junior MP, young uncertain, looked at Bryn. Ma'am, you need to do exactly what Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves just ordered, Bryn said. Her voice was calm, professional. The voice of someone who'd spent years giving orders in situations far more chaotic than this. These 3 men committed sexual assault with a deadly weapon. They destroyed government property. They conspired to intimidate and harass, and they did it in front of a witness who will testify to everything. She looked directly at Graves. Private Lennox Kim, 20 years old. She saw everything before they threatened her and she ran. You'll need to find her and get her statement before anyone has a chance to intimidate her into silence. Graves nodded once, turned to one of the instructors. Williams, find Private Kim. Bring her to the command office. Stay with her. No one talks to her except Admiral Hartman or myself. Clear. Clear, Master Guns. The MPS moved in to secure the 3 Marines. Garrett tried to speak. This is bullshit. We were just... You have the right to remain silent, the senior MP interrupted. I suggest you use it. Bryn reached into her jacket pocket and retrieved a black ID wallet. Military issue, sealed with classifications most people on this base had never seen. She extended it toward Graves without a word. Graves took it, his weathered hands steady. 36 years in the Corps had taught him not to react until he had all the information. But when he opened that wallet, when he saw the credentials inside, something changed in his posture. Not surprise, recognition. He'd been right about her. Commander Bryn Thatcher, Naval Special Warfare, Tier 1 clearance, SOCOM Special Investigator. Master Guns, Bryn said quietly. I need you to contact Rear Admiral Wade Hartman immediately. Tell him we have a situation that requires his personal attention. Tell him it involves Lieutenant Colonel Russo's chain of command and a federal investigation that's been ongoing for 3 weeks. Graves closed the wallet, met her eyes. You've been here the whole time. Since day 1. And you let them... He glanced at her torn uniform. I needed them to commit the crime, Sergeant. Not just think about it, not just threaten it. I needed them to actually do it, because that's the only way the system can't protect them anymore. Graves was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. The footage I've been keeping. You knew about it. I suspected, but I couldn't ask. It had to come from you, willingly, or it wouldn't hold up in court. How did you know I'd help? Bryn's expression softened just slightly. Because Sergeant Fallon Brooks trusted you enough to give you those backup files before she left. Because you've been fighting this fight alone for 3 years. And because I can recognize an ally when I see one. She held out her hand for the wallet. Graves returned it. The Admiral will want to see you immediately, Commander. I know, but first I need medical to document these injuries. She gestured to the 3 Marines being secured. And I need their uniforms photographed before anyone has a chance to clean up or dispose of evidence. Standard assault protocol. Already on it, Graves said. He turned to the MPS. Get medical down here. Full documentation. Photographs of all injuries, torn clothing, everything. This is now a federal investigation scene. Nothing gets touched, moved, or disposed of without chain of custody documentation. The corridor had filled with personnel now. Word had spread. Faces appeared in doorways. Whispers echoed off concrete. Everyone wanted to see what had happened. Wanted to know if the rumors were true. That 3 Marines had attacked someone. That the someone had put all 3 on the ground. That nothing would be the same after today. Bryn stood in the center of it all. Torn uniform, calm expression, hands steady. She'd been the center of attention before. In firefights, in congressional hearings, in rooms where her presence made men with stars on their shoulders uncomfortable. This was just another battlefield. Different weapons, same war. Admiral Wade Hartman arrived 12 minutes later. He'd driven himself, broken multiple speed limits. His face was set in the expression of a man who knew his career was about to change course and wasn't sure yet which direction it would go. Graves met him at the entrance to the corridor, spoke quietly, handed him Bryn's credentials. Hartman read them. His jaw tightened. He looked down the corridor at Bryn, at the 3 Marines being loaded onto gurneys under MP guard, at the training knife in an evidence bag, at the torn fabric that told a story no official report could hide. "Commander Thatcher," he said as he approached. His voice was carefully neutral. "Would you join me in a secure location?" "Of course, Admiral." They walked together through corridors that seemed to hold their breath. Every person they passed stood a little straighter. Every conversation died as they approached. The word was already spreading. Something had happened. Something big. Something that would matter. Hartman led her to a small conference room near the command office. Windows covered, doors sealed, soundproof. The kind of room where difficult truths were told and harder decisions were made. He gestured to a chair. Bryn sat. He remained standing for a moment, reading through her credentials again, as if hoping they'd say something different the second time. They didn't. Finally, he sat. "They had no idea who you were." "No, sir. You could have identified yourself at any time. Could have stopped it before it escalated." "I could have, but then they would have just found another target. Someone without SEAL training. Someone without SOCOM backing. Someone like Private Lennox Kim. Or like the 4 women who came before her and got silenced." Hartman was quiet for a long moment. "How much do you know?" "Everything, sir. Corporal Reese Donovan, Private Harper Quinn, Lance Corporal Ivy Marshall, Sergeant Fallon Brooks. 4 formal complaints in 18 months. All reviewed by Lieutenant Colonel Russo. All dismissed as unfounded. All victims that transferred discharged or pressured into withdrawing their statements." She leaned forward slightly. "And I know that you signed off on at least 2 of those dismissals without conducting independent verification, which makes you either complicit or negligent." "I'm hoping it's the latter." Hartman's face went pale. "Commander, I trusted my director of training to conduct thorough—" "You trusted the wrong man, Admiral, and women suffered because of it." The silence was heavy, crushing. "What happens now?" Hartman asked quietly. "Now you make a choice, sir. You can try to contain this. Call it a misunderstanding. Pressure me to accept a quiet resolution in exchange for protecting the base's reputation. That's what Lieutenant Colonel Russo would recommend. It's what he's done 4 times before." She paused. "Or you can do what's right. You can allow a full federal investigation. You can open your records. You can let SOCOM expose every failure, every covered-up complaint, every time the system chose institutional protection over individual justice. That will destroy careers, including mine. Yes, sir, it will. But it will also save lives. And it will send a message to every base in the military that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated anymore." Hartman stood, walked to the window, stared at his reflection in the darkened glass. "I've served for 34 years, he said quietly. "I've commanded 3 bases, led men in combat, made decisions that cost lives and saved lives, and I thought I understood what leadership meant." He turned to face her. "But I failed those 4 women. I prioritized chain of command over their safety. I believed reports instead of listening to voices. I chose institutional stability over individual justice." His voice hardened with resolve. "I won't make that mistake again." He reached for the phone on the conference table, dialed a number from memory. "This is Rear Admiral Hartman. I need to speak with the NCIS Regional Director immediately." "Yes, I'll hold." He covered the receiver, looked at Bryn. "I assume you've already contacted your chain of command?" "Admiral Kerrigan was notified the moment I secured the scene, sir." Hartman almost smiled. Of course she was. The voice on the other end came back. Hartman's expression became formal, official. "Director Chen, this is Rear Admiral Wade Hartman, commanding officer of Fort Stockton Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility. I'm calling to report a sexual assault committed by 3 active duty Marines against the Navy SEAL commander who was conducting an undercover investigation on my base. I'm requesting immediate NCIS presence in full federal jurisdiction." He listened, nodded. "Yes, I understand the implications. I'm prepared to provide full cooperation and access to all records, including personnel files, security footage, and previous complaint documentation dating back 3 years." Another pause. "Yes, sir, I understand my own conduct will be part of the review." "I accept that." He hung up, sat down heavily. "They'll be here in 90 minutes. NCIS and SOCOM Inspector General." "Yes, sir." "And Lieutenant Colonel Russo will be arrested before nightfall if Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves' evidence is as comprehensive as I believe it is. Hartman nodded slowly. The USB drive, the backup footage. Graves mentioned it in his initial report to me 8 months ago. I ordered him to turn it over to Russo for investigation. And it disappeared into Russo's office, never to be seen again. But Graves is smarter than Russo gave him credit for. He kept copies, multiple copies, in multiple locations, because he knew someday someone would need them. Someone like you, someone like me. Hartman was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been building since the moment he'd seen her credentials. Why volunteer for this? You're a SEAL, Tier 1. You could have any assignment in the world. Why choose to be assaulted, humiliated, torn down, just to catch 3 junior Marines and 1 corrupt colonel? Bryn reached into her collar, pulled out a small silver chain. A Navy cross hung from it. 5 years ago, my best friend and teammate, Lieutenant Sloan Ashford, reported being sexually assaulted by a superior officer during a training evolution. She filed a formal complaint. It was reviewed by her chain of command and dismissed as unfounded. The officer received a letter of counseling. Sloan received a reputation as a troublemaker. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were hard. 6 months later, she ate her service weapon in her barracks room, alone, ashamed, believing that the service she dedicated her life to had abandoned her when she needed it most. She tucked the Navy Cross back inside her collar. I made a promise at her funeral that no other woman would die because the system chose to protect predators instead of warriors. That's why I do this, Admiral, because Sloan deserved better. And so do the 4 women whose complaints you signed off on without truly investigating. Hartman's hands were shaking slightly. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, I know, but I am truly sorry. Then help me make it right, sir. Help me ensure Fort Stockton becomes a model for how to handle these cases instead of a cautionary tale about institutional failure. I will. You have my word. There was a knock at the door. Graves entered. Admiral Lieutenant Colonel Russo is requesting to speak with you. He says it's urgent. Hartman and Bryn exchanged a look. Send him in, Hartman said, but have 2 MPs standing by outside. Graves nodded and left. Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo entered 30 seconds later. 48 years old, 22 years of service, director of training, a man who'd built his career on being the kind of officer who made problems disappear. He looked at Bryn, at her torn uniform. At her calm expression, something flickered in his eyes, not quite recognition, but suspicion. Admiral, I've heard there was an incident in the equipment corridor. I wanted to brief you personally before things get out of hand. Out of hand, Hartman repeated flatly. Yes, sir. It appears there was a training incident. 3 of our Marines may have been overly aggressive with a female logistics coordinator during a combat drill. I've spoken with their platoon commander. We're prepared to offer the woman a formal apology corrective training for the Marines involved and a full replacement of any damaged equipment. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. A training accident, Bryn said quietly, her first words since Russo had entered. Russo looked at her properly for the first time. Really looked. And Bryn saw the exact moment he realized this woman wasn't what she appeared to be. Saw the confidence start to crack. I'm sorry, who are you exactly, he asked. Bryn stood, extended her credentials. Commander Bryn Thatcher, Naval Special Warfare, SOCOM Special Investigator. I've been embedded at Fort Stockton for 3 weeks investigating a pattern of sexual assault complaints that you, Lieutenant Colonel, have systematically suppressed, falsified, and covered up in violation of federal law. Russo's face went white. That's absurd. I've conducted every investigation by the book. If there were any irregularities, they were... Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves, Bryn called. Graves entered, placed a USB drive on the table. 3 years of security camera footage, Bryn said, showing Corporal Garrett Hollis assaulting Lance Corporal Reese Donovan, showing Lance Corporal Zane Merrick destroying the uniform of Private Harper Quinn, showing Private First Class Cole Brennan engaging in unwanted physical contact with Lance Corporal Ivy Marshall, and showing you Lieutenant Colonel Russo meeting privately with Garrett Hollis after each formal complaint was filed, and accessing the security system to delete official footage corresponding to each incident. Russo stared at the drive like it was a live grenade. I was conducting investigations. I had authority to... You had authority to investigate, Hartman said, his voice cold as steel. You did not have authority to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, or falsify official reports. And you sure as hell didn't have authority to enable serial predators just because one of them has an uncle at the Pentagon. Russo's eyes widened. Admiral, this is clearly a setup. She came here looking to... The door opened again. Two NCIS agents in civilian clothes entered, federal badges on their belts. Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo, the lead agent said. Russo turned. Yes, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate the Uniform Code of Military Justice, destruction of government records, and accessory after the fact to multiple counts of sexual assault. You have the right to remain silent. As the agent continued reading rights, Russo's legs seemed to give out. He grabbed the table for support. His face had gone from white to gray. This is a mistake, he said weakly. Colonel Hollis he'll fix this. He has connections. He can make calls. This will all go away. Bryn leaned close, spoke quietly. Only Russo could hear. Colonel Thaddeus Hollis can make all the calls he wants, but SOCOM doesn't answer to the Pentagon, and federal charges don't disappear because someone knows a congressman. Your career is over, Colonel. The only question now is how many years you spend in Leavenworth. As Russo was led away in handcuffs, the room exhaled. Hartman sat down heavily. Graves remained standing, arms crossed, expression unreadable. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Bryn said. Colonel Hollis will fight. He'll use every connection, every favor, every piece of leverage he has. He'll try to discredit me, discredit this investigation, discredit SOCOM oversight. There will be congressional inquiries, media attention, pressure from every direction. I know, Hartman said, but for the first time in 3 years, I'm not worried about pressure from above. I'm worried about the women we failed. How do I face them? How do I apologize for what this base put them through? You start by inviting them back, Bryn said. You bring Reese Donovan, Harper Quinn, Ivy Marshall, and Fallon Brooks back to testify at the courts martial. You let them see justice happen. You let them know their voices mattered. And then you build a system that ensures no other woman has to go through what they did. Graves spoke for the first time since entering. With respect, Commander, these women trusted the system once. It broke them. Why would they trust it again? Because this time they won't be alone. This time SOCOM will be watching. Federal oversight will be in place. And this time there will be consequences for failure. She looked at both men. But more than that, they'll come back because they deserve to see the men who hurt them face justice. They deserve closure. And they deserve to know that their pain meant something. That it changed the system. That it saved the next woman. Hartman stood, extended his hand to Bryn. Whatever you need, Commander. Full access. Complete cooperation. You have my word. Bryn shook it. I'll hold you to that, Admiral. As she left the conference room, as she walked through corridors that now felt different, somehow Bryn felt the weight of what came next settling onto her shoulders. The arrests were just the beginning. The courts-martial would take months. The investigations would expose failures at every level. Lives would be destroyed. Careers would end. The entire base would be under a microscope. But somewhere out there, 4 women who'd been silenced would hear that justice was finally coming, that their complaints hadn't been ignored, that the system, broken as it was, could still be forced to do the right thing. And somewhere else in every base across the military predators would hear a different message, that the cost of silence had just gotten too high, that the women they dismissed as weak or forgettable or disposable were none of those things. They were warriors, and warriors don't stay silent forever. Bryn walked out into the Texas heat. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The training yard was quiet, formations dismissed, the day's work done. But her work was just beginning. She pulled out her phone, sent a secure message to Admiral Kerrigan. Phase 1 complete, 3 subjects in custody, Russo arrested, Hartman cooperating. Request immediate SOCOM oversight team and victim services support. The hard part starts now. The response came back in seconds. Well done, Commander. Team inbound within 24 hours. Take the night. You've earned it. Bryn looked at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it, pocketed the phone, and walked toward the temporary quarters where she'd been living undercover for 3 weeks. Tomorrow would bring interrogations, depositions, evidence reviews, victim interviews. Tomorrow would bring the weight of bureaucracy and the resistance of people who preferred convenient lies to difficult truths. But tonight, just for tonight, she would allow herself to feel what she'd been holding back since the moment Zane Merrick had cut open her uniform. Relief. Not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. The fight for Fort Stockton. The fight for Reese and Harper and Ivy and Fallon. The fight for every woman who would come after. The fight Sloan had started 5 years ago when she'd chosen to speak up instead of stay silent. Bryn touched the Navy Cross hanging beneath her torn shirt. I'm keeping my promise, Sloan, one base at a time, one predator at a time, until they're all gone. The stars were coming out now, infinite and eternal, witnesses to every promise made and broken under their light. But this promise Bryn knew would be kept, no matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. Justice was coming to Fort Stockton. And after Fort Stockton, justice would come for every base that had chosen silence over truth. Because Commander Bryn Thatcher had just proven something that predators and their protectors had always denied. That one woman properly motivated and thoroughly prepared could bring down an entire system built on institutional failure. And there were 16 more bases on her list. The emergency review was scheduled for 0800 the following morning. Admiral Hartman's conference room, a space designed for decisions that affected careers, protocols, futures. The kind of room where justice was supposed to happen. But Bryn had been in enough of these rooms to know that justice and protocol didn't always align. She arrived at 0745. Early, not because she was nervous, because she wanted to see who arrived first, who sat where, who made eye contact, and who didn't. Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo was already there. Seated at the far end of the table, a stack of files in front of him, crisp uniform, face neutral, but his eyes tracked her the moment she entered, calculating, assessing, looking for weakness. He wouldn't find any. Bryn took a seat opposite him, said nothing, just waited. Admiral Hartman entered next, followed by Lieutenant Commander Price. Then the base JAG officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, Major Cassidy Brennan. No relation to Cole Brennan, Bryn had verified. Just an unfortunate coincidence. The three Marines were brought in separately. Escorted by MPS, Garrett Hollis had his arm in a sling. Zane Merrick moved stiffly, ribs clearly bruised. Cole Brennan looked like he hadn't slept. Their attorney, a JAG captain named Marcus Veld, sat between them and the rest of the room like a human shield. Last through the door was Master Gunnery Sergeant Dalton Graves. He wasn't part of the official proceedings, but Hartman had requested his presence as the senior enlisted witness. Graves took a position standing near the back wall, arms crossed, face stone. Hartman called the room to order. This is an administrative review of the incident that occurred at 14:30 hours 2 days ago in the equipment corridor of the Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility. Commander Bryn Thatcher, you are not under investigation. But protocol requires we establish a complete record before this matter proceeds to SOCOM oversight. Russo leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, I believe the protocol requires we examine all aspects of the incident, including Commander Thatcher's conduct and mental state at the time. Bryn's eyes didn't move, but something shifted in the room, a pressure change, like weather turning. Hartman frowned. Explain. Russo opened the top file. I've reviewed the service records of Corporal Hollis, Lance Corporal Merrick, and Private First Class Brennan. All three have exemplary records. No prior disciplinary actions. No substantiated complaints. They are, by every measurable standard, model Marines. He paused. Let that sit. In contrast, I've also reviewed what limited information is available regarding Commander Thatcher's recent assignments. And I've found several concerning gaps. Periods of deployment with no clear operational record, psychological evaluations that are classified above my clearance level, and a pattern of high-risk assignments that statistically correlate with post-traumatic stress behaviors. Bryn's jaw tightened, just slightly. Graves saw it from across the room. What are you suggesting, Colonel? Hartman asked. His voice was careful, too careful. Russo looked directly at Bryn. I'm suggesting that Commander Thatcher may have misinterpreted a routine training correction as a hostile action due to unresolved trauma, that she responded with disproportionate force, and that she is now using her SOCOM credentials to justify what was in fact an unprovoked assault on 3 junior enlisted personnel. The room went silent. Captain Veld, the defense attorney, nodded. My clients are prepared to testify that they were attempting to provide corrective feedback on Commander Thatcher's combat stance when she became agitated, verbally hostile, and physically aggressive without warning. Garrett Hollis spoke up, voice steady, rehearsed. She just snapped, sir. 1 second we're talking. Next second she's putting Zane on the ground. We didn't even have time to defend ourselves. Zane nodded. It was like she was somewhere else, like she thought we were enemy combatants or something. Cole stayed quiet, but his silence felt like agreement. Bryn sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table in front of her, her breathing even. But inside she was calculating. Russo had done exactly what she'd expected. He'd flipped the script, made the predators into victims, made the victim into the threat. It was textbook institutional protection, and it was about to fail spectacularly. Hartman looked at Bryn. "Commander, do you wish to respond?" Bryn took a slow breath. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and placed a small digital recorder on the table, the kind used for operational debriefs. Military grade, encrypted, time-stamped. "I do, sir, but first I'd like to play something." She pressed play. The audio quality was crystal clear. Voices echoed through the conference room speaker. Zane's voice. "Your uniform is too tight here. Let me adjust it." The unmistakable sound of fabric tearing. Deliberate, slow, a blade cutting through cloth. Garrett's voice. "Consider this field correction." Laughter. Low, cruel, predatory. Then Bryn's voice. Calm, professional. "You have one chance. Step back." More laughter. Zane again. "You threatening us?" Cole nervous. "She can't do anything. She's nobody." Garrett. "Who are you?" The audio ended. Bryn looked at Russo. "That recording was made on my personal device as part of my investigative protocol. It is time-stamped at 14:27 hours, 3 minutes before the physical altercation. It clearly establishes that Corporal Hollis, Lance Corporal Merrick, and Private First Class Brennan were engaged in deliberate harassment, destruction of government property, and sexual assault with a weapon." She let that sink in. "I gave them a warning. I gave them a chance to step back, to walk away. They chose to continue. Everything that happened after that was lawful self-defense and citizens' arrest of individuals committing felonies in my presence." Russo's face didn't change. "Audio can be edited, taken out of context." Bryn nodded. "It can, which is why I also have this." She placed a USB drive on the table. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves, would you please confirm what's on this drive?" Graves stepped forward. His voice carried the weight of 36 years in uniform. 3 years of security camera footage from the equipment wing training corridors and storage areas. Footage that was removed from the official base security archive but retained on backup servers that I maintained independently for this exact purpose." He looked at Russo, not with anger, with something colder, the disappointment of a man who'd served honorably watching another man betray everything the uniform stood for. "That footage shows Corporal Hollis physically intimidating Lance Corporal Reese Donovan in the same corridor on March 14th, 2022. Shows him backing her against a wall. Shows him touching her without consent. Shows her filing a complaint the next day." Graves paused. "It shows Lance Corporal Merrick using a training knife to cut the uniform shirt of Private Harper Quinn in the equipment storage area on August 9th, 2023. Shows him laughing while she cried. Shows her requesting immediate transfer 2 days later." His voice hardened. "It shows Private First Class Brennan cornering Lance Corporal Ivy Marshall during an evening training session on November 3rd, 2023. Shows unwanted physical contact. Shows her trying to get away. Shows her going on medical leave the following week and never returning to active duty." He placed both hands on the table, leaned forward. "And it shows Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo meeting privately with Corporal Garrett Hollis within 48 hours of each formal complaint being filed. Shows him accessing the security archive system from his office. Shows the deletion timestamps matching exactly with the incident dates. Shows him destroying evidence to protect these 3 men because Garrett Hollis is the nephew of Colonel Thaddeus Hollis at the Pentagon." The room exploded. Russo shot to his feet. "That is a lie. I conducted legitimate investigations that found no merit to—" Hartman raised his hand, voice like iron. "Sit down, Colonel." Russo stayed standing. "Admiral, this is clearly a coordinated effort to discredit legitimate command authority. Commander Thatcher came here with an agenda. I said sit down." Hartman's voice cracked like a whip. Russo sat, but his face was red, his hands shaking. Hartman looked at the JAG officer. "Major Brennan, I want that USB drive verified immediately. Full forensic analysis. Chain of custody established. If what Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves says is accurate, we are no longer talking about a single incident. We are talking about a 3-year pattern of sexual assault, institutional cover-up, and obstruction of justice." Major Brennan took the drive. Her expression was grim. "Yes, sir. I'll have preliminary analysis within 2 hours." Hartman turned to Captain Veld. "Does your counsel wish to continue with the narrative that your clients were providing routine training feedback?" Veld looked at his 3 clients, at the recorder still sitting on the table, at the space where the USB drive had been. His jaw worked silently for a moment. "I would like to request a recess to consult with my clients, Admiral." Denied. Hartman's patience was gone. You'll have plenty of time to consult when this proceeds to courts-martial, which it will, today. I'm ordering all 3 of your clients transferred to federal custody pending trial. I'm also ordering Lieutenant Colonel Russo placed under arrest pending NCIS investigation. Garrett's face went white. Zane stared at the table. Cole started to cry, quietly at first, then harder, shoulders shaking. But Bryn wasn't watching them. She was watching Russo, because this wasn't over. Men like Russo didn't go down without taking everything around them with them. And she was right. Russo stood slowly, deliberately. Admiral Hartman, before you make any decisions, you'll regret I suggest you consider the broader implications. Corporal Hollis is the nephew of Colonel Thaddeus Hollis, Pentagon Strategic Planning, a man with significant influence over procurement budgets, deployment authorizations, and congressional liaison. If you proceed with this witch hunt, you will find yourself on the wrong side of people who control your career, your reputation, and your future. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Hartman stared at Russo for a long time, long enough that Bryn wondered if the Admiral was going to fold, if the system was going to protect itself one more time, if she'd just exposed herself and 4 victims for nothing. Then Hartman spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 3 decades in uniform, of decisions made under fire, of understanding finally what command really meant. Colonel Russo, in my 34 years of service, I have made many mistakes. I have looked the other way when I should have looked closer. I have prioritized the chain of command over the people in that chain. I have believed men I should have questioned, and I have failed women who deserve better. He stood, met Russo's eyes. I signed off on complaint dismissals without conducting independent verification. I trusted your word over the voices of 4 women who had the courage to come forward. I chose institutional stability over individual justice. Those failures are mine to own, and I will own them. His voice hardened, but I will not fail today. You are hereby relieved of duty pending a full investigation by NCIS and SOCOM Inspector General. You will surrender your credentials, your access, and your sidearm, and you will be escorted to isolation holding until federal transport can be arranged. Russo's face twisted. You're making a mistake, Wade. Colonel Hollis can make all the calls he wants. Hartman nodded to the MPS. But he doesn't command this base. I do. And on this base, we follow the law. As Russo was escorted out in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Bryn one last time. And what she saw there wasn't defeat. It was promise. A promise that this wasn't over. That men like Colonel Thaddeus Hollis didn't forget. But Bryn had faced worse than career politicians with Pentagon connections. What happened next, however, changed the entire trajectory of the case. Without warning, the conference room door opened, not gently, with authority. Rear Admiral Petra Kerrigan entered, flanked by 2 agents in civilian clothes. NCIS, their badges prominent on their belts. Behind them came another figure, a woman in her late 20s, blonde, athletic, wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself like someone who'd spent time in uniform. Hartman straightened. Admiral Kerrigan, I wasn't informed you'd be joining us. Kerrigan's expression was carved from ice. You weren't supposed to be informed, Wade. SOCOM has been monitoring this situation since Commander Thatcher filed her initial report 3 weeks ago. These NCIS agents have been embedded at Fort Stockton in civilian cover since day 1. What you just witnessed wasn't a spontaneous investigation. It was the culmination of a federal operation into systemic sexual assault and institutional cover-up. She gestured to the woman behind her. This is former Sergeant Fallon Brooks. She separated from active duty 8 months ago after filing a harassment complaint that was dismissed by Lieutenant Colonel Russo. She's agreed to testify in person today. Fallon Brooks stepped forward. Her eyes found the 3 Marines. Garrett Hollis specifically, and the fear that had been in her eyes in the photos Bryn had seen was gone, replaced by something harder. I want them to see me, Fallon said. Her voice was steady, strong. I want them to know I didn't disappear. I didn't forget, and I'm not afraid anymore. Kerrigan looked at the 3 Marines. Corporal Hollis, Lance Corporal Merrick, Private First Class Brennan. You are hereby charged with multiple counts of sexual assault, conspiracy, conduct unbecoming, and destruction of government property. You will be transferred to federal custody today. Your courts-martial will begin within 60 days. Captain Vell tried to speak. Kerrigan cut him off with a look. Your clients have the right to counsel. They do not have the right to delay justice any longer. She nodded to the NCIS agents. Transport them. As the 3 Marines were let out, Fallon Brooks watched. Her hands were clenched at her sides, but she didn't look away. didn't flinch. When they were gone, she turned to Bryn. Thank you for being what I couldn't be, for fighting when I was too afraid. Bryn shook her head. You were never afraid, Sergeant. You were betrayed by a system that should have protected you. But you gave Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves those backup files. You gave us the evidence we needed. You fought. You just needed someone to listen. Fallon's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Is it really over? For you, yes. For Fort Stockton, it's just beginning. Bryn gestured to the chairs. Sit, please. There's something else you need to hear. Kerrigan waited until Fallon was seated. Then she placed a file on the table. Thicker than the others. Official seals on every page. Commander Thatcher, your work at Fort Stockton has exceeded expectations. The evidence you've gathered, combined with Master Gunnery Sergeant Graves' documentation and Sergeant Brooks's testimony, has given us the foundation for 17 additional investigations. She opened the file. SOCOM has identified 17 other military installations where complaint patterns suggest systemic cover-up, similar dismissal rates, similar transfers, similar pressure on victims to withdraw statements. Bryn's stomach tightened. 17 bases. Hundreds of potential victims. Years of institutional failure. You've been selected to lead those investigations, Kerrigan continued. Not all of them. We're assembling a team, but the most problematic bases, the ones with the deepest rot, those are yours. She pulled out a specific file. Your next assignment is Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, California. Bryn opened it. 6 formal complaints in 14 months, all resolved internally. All victims either transferred or separated from service. But it was the name at the top of the reviewing officer column that made her blood run cold. Captain Marcus Hollis, executive officer, Garrett Hollis's older brother. Kerrigan watched Bryn's face. He knows you're coming. His uncle made sure of that. Colonel Thaddeus Hollis has spent the past 48 hours making calls to congressional oversight committees, to the Inspector General's office, to media contacts. He's building a narrative that you're a rogue operator, that SOCOM is overstepping, that this is a witch hunt targeting decorated officers because of political correctness. She leaned forward. Marcus Hollis has had 2 days to prepare, to cover his tracks, to turn his people against you before you even arrive. And he has his uncle's full support. Pentagon resources, congressional protection, media spin. Kerrigan paused. This is voluntary, Bryn. I can't order you to take this assignment. If you want to step back, let another investigator handle Coronado. I'll understand. You've already done more than anyone could ask. The room was silent, waiting. Bryn looked at the file, at the photos of 6 women, young, proud, betrayed. She thought about Sloan, about the Navy Cross hidden under her shirt, about the promise she'd made at a funeral 5 years ago. She thought about Fallon Brooks sitting across from her, finally able to face her attackers because someone had listened. She thought about the 17 bases, the hundreds of women waiting for someone to care enough to fight. When do I leave? Bryn asked. Kerrigan almost smiled. After the memorial dedication, 8 months from now. Give the courts-martial time to proceed. Let Fort Stockton heal. Let these 4 women see that justice is possible. Then we move on, Coronado. She stood, extended her hand. Thank you, Commander. Bryn shook it. Don't thank me yet, ma'am. Not until the last predator falls. The next 8 months passed in a controlled chaos of legal proceedings and institutional reform. The courts-martial of Garrett Hollis, Zane Merrick, and Cole Brennan became the most closely watched military trials in a decade. Media descended. Congressional hearings were held. The entire military justice system found itself under a microscope. And through it all, 4 women testified. Reese Donovan, Harper Quinn, Ivy Marshall, Fallon Brooks. They told their stories, relived their trauma, faced their attackers across a courtroom, and they were believed. The verdicts came in February, 8 months after the Corridor incident that had started it all. Garrett Hollis, 15 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth. Dishonorable discharge, loss of all rank and benefits. Zane Merrick, 12 years confinement, dishonorable discharge. Cole Brennan, 8 years confinement, bad conduct discharge. Lieutenant Colonel Knox Russo, 20 years confinement, dismissal from service, loss of all retirement benefits. The verdicts were final, the appeals denied, and Fort Stockton began to heal. On a cool morning in late February, 8 months and 6 days after Commander Bryn Thatcher had allowed 3 Marines to cut open her uniform, a memorial dedication ceremony was held at the center of the base. The wall was simple, stone and steel, dignified, permanent. engraved with words that would outlast everyone present, in memory of those silenced, for those who found their voice. Commander Thatcher stood in full dress, whites, ribbons across her chest, Navy cross prominent above her left breast pocket. She wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't pretending to be less than she was. She was Commander Bryn Thatcher, Navy SEAL, Tier 1 operator, and the woman who'd brought justice to Fort Stockton. Beside her stood 4 women in civilian clothes: Reese Donovan, Harper Quinn, Ivy Marshall, Fallon Brooks. They'd all separated from service. All carried scars the verdicts couldn't erase. But they'd come back for this, to see their names honored, to know their pain had meant something. Private Lennox Kim stood at the podium, the young woman who'd stumbled into that corridor and witnessed what could have been her own future. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd run away. She wore corporal stripes now, confident, strong. "I came to Fort Stockton 9 months ago," Lennox said, her voice carried across the silent yard. "I was terrified. I didn't know if I belonged here. Didn't know if I was strong enough. And then I saw 3 men try to break someone they thought was weak." She looked at Bryn. Commander Thatcher didn't just defend herself. She defended all of us. Every woman who's been told she doesn't belong. Every woman who's been made to feel small. She showed us that strength isn't about being the loudest or the biggest. It's about being the most ready, the most prepared, the most unwilling to accept injustice. The applause was quiet, respectful, but it echoed like thunder. Master Chief Petty Officer Dalton Graves spoke next. Promoted, reassigned, now the face of Fort Stockton's cultural transformation. "I spent 36 years in uniform," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And for too many of those years I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I kept evidence when I should have acted. I waited for someone else to be brave." He looked at the memorial. Lieutenant Sloan Ashford took her own life 5 years ago because the system failed her. These 4 women standing here almost left the service because the system failed them. But Commander Thatcher didn't wait for the system to fix itself. She became the change we needed. She showed us that one person properly motivated and thoroughly prepared can bring down an entire network of institutional failure. He turned to Bryn, extended a small wooden box. "This belonged to Lieutenant Ashford. Her family asked me to hold it until I found someone worthy of carrying her legacy forward, someone who would make sure her death meant something." Bryn opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was Sloan's Navy Cross, the official one, the one presented at her funeral. And beneath it, a letter in Sloan's handwriting. Her vision blurred as she read, "To whoever finds this, don't let them win. Don't let them make you small. Don't let them convince you that silence is survival. Fight, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because someone is watching. Someone is waiting for you to be brave first. Be brave, so they can be brave too." Sloan Bryn folded the letter with shaking hands, placed the medal back in the box. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphone caught every word. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of funerals for women who deserve to live. I'm tired of watching good people break, because the system protects predators instead of warriors. I'm tired of the excuse that this is just how things are." She looked at the 4 women beside her, at Lennox, at Graves, at the hundreds of personnel gathered for the ceremony. This memorial isn't just for the past. It's a promise for the future. A promise that every complaint will be heard. Every victim will be believed. Every predator will be held accountable. Not because the system is perfect, but because we won't accept anything less. She placed her hand on the stone wall. "Sloan, this is for you, and for every woman who came before. Your fight is over, but ours continues, and we will not stop until the last predator falls and the last victim finds justice." Admiral Kerrigan stepped forward. She held an envelope. Official seals, federal classification markings. "Commander Thatcher, your work at Fort Stockton has set a precedent that will reshape how the military handles sexual assault cases for decades to come. SOCOM is implementing oversight protocols at 17 installations. You've been selected to lead the most critical investigations." She handed Bryn the envelope but didn't release it immediately. Her expression was grave. "Your next assignment is Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, but before you accept, you need to understand what you're walking into." Kerrigan pulled out a second file. 2 days ago, we received a new complaint from Coronado. A female ensign named Kira Valdez, 24 years old. She filed her 3rd harassment complaint in 6 months. Like the 2 before it, it was reviewed by Captain Marcus Hollis and marked "resolved internally with counseling." She paused. Yesterday, Ensign Valdez was found unconscious in her barracks room. Overdose, prescription medications. She's alive in critical condition at Balboa Naval Medical Center, but the doctors say it was intentional. The memorial wall seemed to loom larger, the cycle continuing, the pattern repeating. Captain Marcus Hollis is Garrett Hollis's older brother, Kerrigan continued, and he's had 8 months to prepare for your arrival. He knows your methods. He's studied the Fort Stockton case. He's learned from his brother's mistakes, and he has his uncle's full support. She finally released the envelope. Colonel Thaddeus Hollis has launched a campaign to discredit you. Congressional inquiries into SOCOM overreach. Inspector General complaints about your conduct. Media stories questioning whether female operators have the emotional stability for investigative work. They're not just protecting Marcus. They're trying to destroy you. To make you the cautionary tale that scares the next investigator into backing down. Kerrigan's eyes were hard. This is voluntary. Walk away, and no one will question it. You've done more than enough. Bryn looked at the envelope, at the memorial wall, at the 4 women who'd found their voices, at Lennox Kim who'd found her courage. She thought about Kira Valdez, 24 years old, in a hospital bed. Having tried to end her pain the same way Sloan had. When do I leave? Bryn asked. Tomorrow, Kerrigan said. Kira Valdez needs to know someone's fighting for her before she wakes up, before she decides whether to try again. Bryn nodded once. Then I leave tonight. That evening after the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Bryn packed her truck under a sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Texas sunset. The last one she'd see for a while. Master Chief Graves found her in the parking lot. You're really going, he said. Not a question. I am. Coronado won't be like Fort Stockton. Marcus Hollis knows you're coming. He'll be ready. I know. Graves was quiet for a moment. Then he extended his hand. Give them hell, Commander. Bryn shook it. That's the plan, Master Chief. She climbed into her truck, started the engine, but before she pulled out, she did one last thing. She drove to the highest point on the base, a small hill overlooking the training yards, the barracks, the memorial wall lit by floodlights in the gathering darkness. She parked, stepped out, opened the wooden box containing both of Sloan's Navy crosses. For 5 years, she'd carried the unofficial one around her neck. A weight, a reminder, a promise unfulfilled. But tonight she placed both medals side by side in the box, closed it, locked it in the glove compartment. I kept my promise, Sloan, she whispered to the darkening sky. You can rest now. Your fight is over. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the physical weight lift from her chest. Not forgotten, not abandoned, released, because Sloan's fight was over. But the fight for Kira Valdez, for the women at Coronado, for the 17 bases waiting for every woman who would come after that fight, was just beginning. And Bryn would be there, ready, prepared, unstoppable. She got back in the truck, merged onto the highway heading west, toward California, toward Coronado, toward whatever trap Marcus Hollis and his Pentagon uncle had spent 8 months preparing. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think one victory means anything? My nephew was a soldier following orders. You destroyed his life over a misunderstanding. Coronado will be different. Captain Hollis is ready for you. And when he's done, you'll wish you'd stayed silent. Colonel Thaddeus Hollis. Bryn read it once, didn't delete it this time. Instead, she forwarded it to Admiral Kerrigan with a single word attached to evidence. Then she kept driving. Because threats didn't scare her anymore. Threats meant she was doing something right. Threats meant the people who'd built empires on silence were afraid. And fear in the right hands was a weapon. 2 hours into the drive, she pulled over at a rest stop just past the Arizona border. The desert stretched infinite under a sky full of stars. She stepped out into air so cold and clean it hurt to breathe. She thought about Kira Valdez, 24 years old, in a hospital bed, wondering if anyone cared enough to fight. She thought about the 17 bases, hundreds of women, thousands of stories untold. She thought about Marcus Hollis, prepared, protected, confident that his uncle's influence would shield him the way it had shielded his brother until Bryn had arrived. He was wrong. Bryn pulled out her phone, opened the secure SOCOM app, typed a message to Admiral Kerrigan. Arriving Coronado in 16 hours. Request immediate access to all complaint files. Security footage personnel records for Captain Marcus Hollis. Request medical liaison with Balboa Naval Medical Center for Ensign Valdez. Request federal witness protection if she agrees to testify. This ends at Coronado, one way or another. The response came back immediately. Approved. Everything you need will be waiting. Medical team standing by. NCIS ready to move on your signal. Be careful, Bryn. The Hollis family plays for keeps. Bryn looked at the message, then typed one more line. So do I, ma'am. So do I. She pocketed the phone, looked up at the infinite stars, the same stars Sloan had looked at, the same stars every warrior had looked at before walking into battle. She wasn't afraid. Fear was for people who had something left to lose. Bryn had already lost her best friend, had already buried the person who mattered most, had already decided that some fights were worth more than survival. And that made her the most dangerous thing Captain Marcus Hollis would ever face. A warrior with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. She got back in the truck. The highway stretched ahead into darkness. California waiting, Coronado waiting, justice waiting. But so was she. The words from the memorial wall echoed in her mind like a prayer, like a promise, like a declaration of war, in memory of those silenced, for those who found their voice. She whispered them into the desert night. This one's for you, Kira, and Sloan, and every woman they tried to break. Hold on. Justice is coming, and this time it won't be denied. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to every promise made and broken under their light. But this promise would be kept, no matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. Because Commander Bryn Thatcher had just proven something that predators and their protectors had always denied. That one woman properly motivated and thoroughly prepared could bring down an entire system built on institutional failure. Fort Stockton was just the beginning. Coronado was next. And after Coronado, there were 16 more bases waiting, 16 more networks of silence to shatter, 16 more chances to prove that justice delayed and denied for so long could still find its moment. The road unfolded ahead, dark, uncertain, dangerous. But Bryn drove into it without hesitation, because she was a Navy SEAL, a Tier 1 operator, a woman who'd made a promise to a dead friend and intended to keep it. And nothing, not Pentagon colonels, not institutional inertia, not threats or intimidation or career destruction, nothing would stop her from seeing that promise through. The fight continued, one base at a time, one predator at a time, one voice at a time, until they were all heard, until they were all believed, until they were all avenged.